Welcome to The Glitter Effect, a podcast dedicated to shining a light on the movers, shakers, change makers, and all-round living legends of our communities who are making a real difference. On today's episode of The Glitter Effect, I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined by community changemaker Louise Larkin, who is the founder and chief inclusion officer of a charity called Friend in Me. And between you and me, I actually believe her middle name should actually be Glitter, with the incredible selfless things that she does in her community. A little bit about Lou. She is a passionate advocate for inclusion, connection, and creating a world where no child feels left out. What started as a single act of kindness has grown into a powerful movement, and she has the ability of bringing children of all abilities together to celebrate friendship, belonging, and acceptance, which all sound very simple, but it doesn't happen very readily across the board. And through Friend in Me, Lou has created a community where play has no barriers, where loneliness is replaced with laughter, and where kindness is at the heart of everything they do at Friend in Me. So her work has not only impacted the lives of countless children and families, but it's also inspired volunteers and supporters to step up, give back, and truly make a difference and spread their glitter. Lou Larkin, it's my absolute pleasure to welcome you to The Glitter Effect. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me. And oh my gosh, sometimes even I get a tear to my eye when I hear that little introductions like that.
I think it doesn't do you justice. We could do way more than that. But yeah, I think that, you need to be celebrating yourself, because people like you do amazing things, and you should always celebrate what you do. I will let our listeners know I do know Lou, and I have known Lou, and I can't remember how long ago since we met,
No,
actually.
it feels like forever. I
Yeah.
think there's been a really beautiful connection, but it's been at least 4 years or 5 years coming up
Yeah,
there.
and
Yeah.
we're connected because of the amazing things you do with, as we've touched on there, with Friend in Me. Can you tell us just a little bit about a story behind what Friend in Me is and what inspired you with what I think is an incredible initiative?
Absolutely. So, Friend in Me started from very humble beginnings, and I was simply driving to my job out in the big corporate world, coming up to 8 years ago. And there was a mother on the radio who was very, very much distraught and in tears that nobody turned up to her little boy's birthday. And as I was driving, I thought to myself, my gosh, that's so sad. Like, how could nobody turn up to a party? And this boy was living with disabilities. And you may remember at the time, the radio station in particular put on a really big party for this little boy, and lots of people turned up, and it was a great little initiative. And as I got back to my desk, I sat down and I rang a couple of girlfriends and I said, I heard this really sad story on the radio today, and I feel like we should put on a party for all the little boys and girls who felt like they haven't been to a party before. And so we did. We had 6 weeks of planning. We just booked the local community hall, and we invited people to come along to this community event and just be celebrated and experience the joy of going or having a party. And that's how it all started. I went back to my job, and then the next year rolled around and we doubled our attendance. We put another event together, and this time we had about 750 people turn up, and we did it the following year, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger and growing.
And why do you think that is? Why do you think it kept growing?
Well, I think that, what we didn't realize was a lot of these people were missing out. And we started to think more about, well, why are they missing out? And we were starting to learn that there was so much exclusion in our society. And a lot of these children were living with disabilities or some kind of challenge. And I feel like as we were getting out there, people coming to us in the community were living with these challenges, and that's why we were growing, and so many more people were attending because of what they were living with.
And why is it so? I mean, it always completely amazes me when we talk about the number of kids who are, miss out on what we think is the simple life's pleasures,
Yeah.
from an adult world. Why is it, do you think, that this still continues? What's do you, there's not probably not one answer to this, but what's sort of happening in our society that makes this happen, and why Friend in Me and other organizations, inclusion organizations, still have to advocate for these people, these kids
Well,
and adults?
Yeah, look, it's a really good question, and there isn't one answer. But what I've learned over the years is it's about education. And I just don't think that we are well educated on what inclusion is, and we're not understanding of the disabilities that may be out there. And we're not understanding that if there is a little child in the cafe that's having a complete meltdown, and they're not just naughty children. I think we've heard that over the years. Oh, he's really naughty, or I was really naughty in school. But now we are coming to the understanding that it's not the naughty child. There just might be something a little bit deeper that we just need to understand.
Mm,
And what I say to a lot of our community when I'm talking, if we can just try and understand a little bit about disability, or about what it's like for these families who are living with these challenges, and some small steps that we can take to make a very small change. If everybody in our society just made one small step to make one small change, the bigger change will come.
yeah.
And I think it's just that understanding and acceptance that we throw around a lot, this acceptance, this inclusion. And we don't want it to just be a buzzword. We just want people to deeply understand how they can try and accept and try and include, and not just turn away from it and have these children and these families miss out on opportunities, like sometimes going to a cafe.
Mm,
They feel like they can't go to a cafe, and they just, because they don't feel like society will be accepting of how their child may behave or react in certain situations. So they don't go. They
yeah.
don't go to events. They don't go to regular things that the everyday family can just do without thinking, like a birthday party.
Yeah.
Um, we're just trying to create that education. When we say education, we don't just mean online platforms, tick the boxes, get a certificate, study.
Yeah.
It's just that understanding of different people's walks of life.
Yeah. Which I think, as you say, the more people talk about this in this space, I think people are becoming more open and
Mhm.
understanding. There's still don't get me wrong, there's still a lot more work that needs to be done in this space. But I mean, I can see it from my kids that their school, for instance, kids are a lot more. We need to I think we always need to take the lead from kids, because they don't have that prejudice already, or their ideas or anything. And I just look and think it's some beautiful things that should come out, and us adults should learn from them, not the other way around with this. But I think we are learning, and I think we are seeing the beautiful things that we can do. And it's not a huge effort from anyone. It's just changing, as you say, the way we think and the way we do things. Um, what there's obviously, you've been talking, this is a space that's like riddled with challenges for you, and it's not something that you do overnight, just decide you're going to start a charity. What has been some of the biggest challenges for you in getting Friend in Me off the ground? Because how long has it been going for, first off?
So it'll be 8 years this year. And, 8 years ago, when I was doing our first event, I never, in my wildest dreams, thought that 8 years later, this would be a charity. So we are a registered charity. We became a registered charity during COVID, which, if anyone has registered for a charity before, it's not an easy process,
No, it's
because
not.
we've got the DGR status, which is even the next level of hardness that we were doing. But if you asked me 8 years ago when we did our first event, even our second event, I never would have thought that I'd still be sitting here as a charity. The average charity generally lasts about 5 years,
Mm-hmm.
and that is because it is very, very hard work. There are a lot of challenges, and I think the challenges that I am coming up with a lot at the moment is there are so many amazing organizations out there. There are so many amazing charities and amazing not-for-profits that are doing, everyone is doing good. They're just trying to put good into the world and give back to the community. But the issue there is that you're up against a lot of people.
Mm,
When you're looking for funding, when you're looking for grants, you know, you could be applying for a grant that 500 other organizations are also applying for. So how do we stand out? And you have to have a very, very high level of resilience to have a charity, because you get a lot of knockbacks. You get a
mm,
lot of no's. You are asking for sponsorship, for donations, please support us. And you get a lot of no's. You get a lot of sort of being thrown down, going, oh, we already support X foundation, which could be a major charity that
Yeah.
has extremely huge amounts of funding, government funding. So,
Mm.
Friend of me solely relies on just community grants and community funding. We don't get any government funding.
Yep.
So I feel like for me, that's been the biggest challenge the whole way through is getting the income coming through to be able to keep these programs going. We're also 100% volunteer. So volunteers they hold us together. We rely heavily on volunteers. But volunteers as well still have other jobs and other things that they need to do. So just sometimes, that falls down at the wayside a little bit because they have other commitments, and that's totally understandable. So it's just really being quite, resilient. I think that I've really learnt over the years to how to deal with these knockbacks and not getting the funding, but just still trying to find that passion to keep on going.
Mm.
And when I talk to people and when I talk to funders, if I'm asking for some sort of funding for a project, I always say, I hope that me standing here as a volunteer 8 years later and showing my passion, that's enough to see how passionate I actually am.
Yeah.
Because I could have stepped away from this years ago because it all might have been just a little bit too hard. But, even after having my own 4 children, I want them to live in an inclusive world. I want them to include others and feel included and just show the kindness and compassion towards all people who are from all different walks of life and really keep that open communication with them. So I'm not just doing it for community kids, I'm doing it for my kids as well. And I think
Mm.
that's what keeps me going with all these very big challenges and these very big hurdles.
Yeah. And look, and you just touched on that. And this is what always amazes me about you. One of the things that amazes me about you is that how you create that balance. You just said you're a mum, but you weren't a mum of 4 kids when you started Friending Me. So you've also become a mum of 4 kids in those 8 years. And you're passionate, and you're also a loving, dedicated wife, and you've got a very good business background. You've got so many balls in the air. How on earth do you balance this? I mean, obviously it goes with ebbs and flows. We appreciate that. How do you balance this and still wake up every morning, because you're giving a lot to others? How do you balance this and make sure that you are also okay and give yourself time?
Sometimes not very well. I
I,
think before we press record, I'm just saying how sick I've been because I think the biggest virus I had was the slow down Lou virus, and just give yourself a minute. But look, I've brought up 4 children while building this organization. So when we started, my oldest Giselle was only 1.5 when we did our first event, and then I had our second, and that it was when I had my second that I decided I was going to leave my corporate role and resign. And that was a very, very big decision for me to make. And I had a very supportive husband that sort of backed me up for that. And then I've gone and had 3 and 4 kids. So it has been a super big juggle. But like I said before, I have so much passion to be this change maker and create good in the world and give back to the world. That's what keeps me going every day. And like I said, it's for my kids to include and feel included. So I feel
yeah,
like I'm sending the right messages to them as a mum and to our community kids, and my 2 big girls especially, they love coming out, putting on a Friend in Me t-shirt, helping mum, and just showing, like, if you say to my oldest, what does your mum do? Oh, she's a boss of a charity that helps kids. That's what she says, the boss
oh
of a charity that helps kids. And so I feel like if I turned around now and went back to a corporate life, I don't feel like I'm influencing them in the right way. I
yeah,
feel like I'm hopefully influencing them to be really good people so that when I'm gone from this world, that they can take over the reins, not necessarily with Friend in Me, but just being a really kind person.
yeah.
Um, Juggling is exactly what it is.
Yeah.
I did some of my best work while I was feeding newborns overnight, and I'd be thinking of ideas, but also at the same time, when as much as, I'm busy, it's also very flexible having my own charity, and, you've got that flexibility to still be at your kids' school and
Yep.
juggling all those balls. So I think that that's what's kept me going with even with the challenges. And when I have a little bit of a downtime, which happens, you get a little bit of burnout and you just think, what for? That probably lasts for about a day or two. And all I need to do is have a single conversation with good people.
Yep.
And I feel, really built up again. I did a presentation at my previous workplace to previous colleagues who I'd worked with for 10 years just
Yep.
before I left. And they asked me to come in and do a talk about, the charity and where I've left off and what I'm doing. And when I was catching the train there, I was feeling a little bit flat, and it was all like, it was just been really busy. Again, we were having the challenges of not getting the funding, etc. But I walked in and I told my story, and I got talking, and my ex-colleague who was sitting next to me said to the group, I heard Louise tell this story 7 years ago. This is however, yeah, 7 years ago, and she still tells it with the same passion 7 years on.
Oh, that's
And
beautiful.
yeah, it was really lovely. And when I walked away, I thought, and I even emailed both my ex-colleagues who organized it, I said, I think that I needed that more than what you needed to hear. So sometimes when I'm feeling these challenges, when it all feels a little bit too much with kids, family, work, I just have to go and talk to someone, and
Yeah.
I get ignited again, like I will today. I guarantee you, I'll
Yeah.
get that passion and that, that ignite. And you think about it, like how the beautiful conversation I just had with the hospital for the pediatric ward, and I feel like, oh, yeah, I need to keep going. I need to
Yeah.
keep doing this.
That's your purpose. It keeps reminding you of what your purpose is, which we all need in whatever space we're in, don't we? It's tough
Yeah,
otherwise.
absolutely.
How have you seen Friend in Me's change lives over the time that you've been involved? What sort of, you don't, obviously we don't need to name names or anything, but are there any stories that stick out to you and regularly give you that purpose?
Yeah, so look, during COVID was a really actually a special time for us. So during COVID, we were able to really build the charity because we did a lot of online Zoom or Zoom parties, a lot of
Mm,
online Zoom parties. Like, Friday, Saturday, Sundays, we do 10 back-to-back Zoom parties with
wow.
characters and singing happy birthday. It was actually crazy. And I had a newborn at the time and a toddler and an older one. Um, for me, that was a really special time for me because through this really tough time of isolation, when a lot of these children were already going through isolation, we were able to bring so much magic and so much joy and connection at that time. So although I don't have one particular child that stands out, that time was really, really special for me, because you would just see their face light up, having their friends online, and then we'd have Spider-Man or Elsa singing in the background. And through really, really hard times, we were able to keep that connection going. And then some other amazing connections that and I guess the ones that have really stood out to me, which are hard as well. We've done a lot of parties for sick kids, and there was one particular little girl who was terminal, and
Mm-hmm.
her family called us to come over and just create some joy, just create, because we started as a party, and I think that all the way through we are party, we are joy, we are magic, we are creating really beautiful memories. And it was coming up to this little girl's 6th birthday. She was declining with her health, and we went over to her house. I bought a face painter, myself and our Elsa character, and we went to this little girl's house, and it was really tough. She had a brain tumor, so she was just sitting, her head was down. Her family had said that she hadn't spoke for a couple of weeks, just because of her speech and everything. Anyway, we just played and we started singing some songs, and we put on Let It Go. And Elsa started dancing with her just around her, sitting on her little chair. And all of a sudden, this little girl lifted up her head and she just blurted out, "Let it go." Just that's
Oh,
all she said. That one line, she blurted out, "Let it go." And I've looked over at her mum, And her mum's just looking at me going, I can't believe she's just blurted that out after all this time. And it was just such a beautiful moment. And in that moment, I was like, we have created this. It was nothing for us. We literally bought a character, a cake, and a face painter.
Mm.
Nothing crazy. But we've been able to create this magical memory for that family of this little girl singing. And she passed away a couple of weeks later, but that's really stuck in my memory of just creating that opportunity for that little girl and her family. And although times were really tough, we created laughter and fun, and that's just what I want to be doing,
Yeah.
as well. Like when I see, it's just that connection. I bring up connection a lot of the time. And we've got our play space out here in Geelong, and the amount of, like, my heart is so full when I see complete strangers in the space connecting with one another, and just being in a really safe place is always so lovely. So over 8 years, there's been so many beautiful moments, but they really stand out for me.
That's beautiful. And it's interesting because just as I was sort of looking through what you guys do, reminding myself what you do, and we was touched on the community connection. I was looking into that. And that was one of my questions to you, but you just answered it, the importance of community connection today, particularly in today's world. But on the flip side of that, I actually found that it was saying that while technology has connected us globally and sort of given us that immediacy, people are reportedly actually feeling less connected and more lonely than they have done in the past. Have
Yeah.
you seen that in your space with Friend in Me? Have you seen any increase as time's gone by?
Absolutely, especially with gaming and social media and all this kind of stuff. I mean, these kids are just not getting out, but it's kind of a catch-22 because that's all they know. Like, I know a lot of therapists these days are using gaming for therapy because that's how these kids are connecting.
Mm,
But it's really important for us as an organization to get together, be in each other's presence, and it might take 2 or 3 weeks for a program to really come off the ground. But it's so important for these kids to be able to just get out and not be in a school environment, just in a fun, like, make play fun again. Like, we were even talking with the hospital, is doing play, but even with the adolescents, because it's
yeah,
okay to get some Play-Doh out or some coloring. It doesn't have to be that that's just for the little kids.
yeah.
So it's really important for me, this community connection face to face, hear, see, touch to an extent, just
Mm,
really being together, because from that, things blossom
yeah.
rather than they do online.
And we
Mm.
saw that in certain areas as for certain people during COVID. I mean, I know I saw that with my kids that there's so much structure generally in a day to day for everybody that when they're given free reign, they go out and these are kids. They weren't all primary school necessarily, but they were out drawing with chalk on the pavements, making hopscotch for people.
Oh,
That it was all that simple stuff
I know.
again. So if it just sort of, whilst COVID for many people was horrendous and gives a lot of PTSD, I always reflect on it and say there were so many good things that came out of it. And it's
Yeah,
that community connection, just brings back that simplicity of life that I think we've actually forgotten, or we've never had in our generation, I think. Yeah.
totally. And there was, like, the acts of kindness during COVID were, I wish we could keep that going. Like, I know that, your kids would give that to Auntie Joe, and you just go drop it on the doorstep. Or, you think about someone who might be feeling a bit down, so you go and buy them some chocolate and you drop it on the doorstep. And there were so many little acts of kindness during COVID, but now we've gone back to normality,
Yeah.
and we're forgetting again those simple things.
Yeah.
So, although please don't ever take us back to where we were. I mean, like I said before, for our organization, we grew from COVID.
Yeah.
Because I sat down, I remember, I will never forget, and this might be going a little bit off track a little bit, but we were due to have our Melbourne Family Fun Day. So with the organisation, we have really big family fun days. and we generally hold one in Melbourne, one in Geelong. And this particular year, it was 2 weeks out or something like that of Melbourne. And
Hmm.
I remember the board calling a meeting and saying, I think we need to cancel this Melbourne one. I'm like, absolutely not. We are not cancelling this. Too much work has gone into it,
Yep.
blah, blah, blah. So we didn't cancel it. And then sure enough, the very next day we are going into lockdown as of tomorrow, and we had to cancel that event. And I'll never forget. I was like, okay, we've cancelled it. And then time was going on. And I thought to myself, right, we are basically events. We are basically face to face. We can either sit here and just let the COVID train go on by, who knows when that will be, or we can turn this around and think about how we're going to continue to make a change, how we're going to continue to keep our community engaged and connected and bring some joy to these children.
Yep.
So I got all of our characters and I said, how do you guys feel about doing online Zooms? Like we'll just lock them in 15-minute increments. And so that's what we did. And we did over 850 during the COVID time. We were on that Zoom. If I had to sing Let It Go Again, or I was, and I'd be sitting there with a baby on my lap. I know we can't see, but I'd be bouncing a baby or putting myself on mute and the toddler was going on. But that was for us, really got us on the map as an organization
Yeah.
because we kept it exciting. Now, I could have turned around at that very point. I'm like, this is it. Friend of me is done. And it would have been 2 years without an event and we would have been doing nothing. But we got our charity status in that time. And so COVID for us as an organization was really positive time.
Yeah, which is great. And you talk about the characters that came along and everything. Were they volunteers themselves?
Everyone volunteered their time.
Yeah.
So incredible because even now at our events, everybody is volunteering. We get beautiful people volunteering to help us with, grants and event management. And it's so wonderful because I can't do it all as one person. There's no way I could keep up with that. And I don't have the skill set to do everything either. I certainly can't dress up as Moana and sing a song. So I was relying heavily on these characters and they would honestly give hours and hours and hours to making sure that these kids were happy and that we started doing Zooms on the RCH ward and they would just be looping us in and it was just it was it was crazy. It was crazy times. We were hours and hours and hours and I could just log on, right? I just set up my Zoom, maybe brush my hair and off I go. These characters would spend hours and hours
Mm,
dressing up to look like Elsa, putting on their makeup. It wasn't just a 5-minute Zoom call.
mm.
It was hours of getting ready, hours of sitting on Zoom. It's just like when I think about it now, it was such an incredible time. And I'm so very grateful that these people who gave their time and their energy and still do to this day, they still come to all our family days. Then we would post meeting, we would record. Thank you so much. It was so lovely to, this is the characters. It was so lovely to have you. Happy birthday again, Jonathan. We hope you have the best day. So then we'd send them videos. Like it was
Oh,
just such an incredible time.
that's gorgeous.
Um, and I think when I'm having a moment like anyone does in business or anyone does in organizations, that I think that there's I can't go on, there's no more. You think about those times and you think about just that one little smile that you may have created, and that's what keeps you going.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I think people need to concentrate and focus more on that as well.
Yeah,
Sometimes. Now
yeah.
we talked about volunteers. How and you said they keep coming back and which is amazing. How are some of the ways that because we know people are busy and people are giving less time and volunteering is going down for across the board. How do you keep your volunteers engaged and how have you kept them feeling valued at Friend in Me, or is it just sort of happened? I mean, there's obviously things you're doing to do that though.
Yeah. Well, I think it's just really important to keep engaging with them and just be grateful, just say thank you and acknowledge them and, for their time. If you can take them out for a lunch to say thank you once in a blue moon, like do that. Like you said, everyone is so strapped for time,
Mm.
but, you know, I think if someone has a skill set that they're willing to give a couple of hours to be able to do, like, don't ever ask me to draw up a flyer. Like, that is not in my resume to be doing graphic design. I am no good at it. I'm so if someone out there it's always really lovely as well when people reach out and engage with you and say, look, this is what I'd love to help with. I'm always really open to that, but I think it's just being really grateful. And once you meet them and you engage with them, and I hope that I'm a kind enough person to show that I really value them and that honestly, without volunteers, this organisation would not be here. It would
Mm.
not be here. I had volunteers we hosted the Reset Zone at the International Air Show at Avalon this year, and I had two girls that volunteered with me for the 3 days for 12 hours a day. They were there volunteering their time for 12 hours over the 3 days. And that was only
Wow.
just the 3 days that we were there. That wasn't the prep, the setting up, all of that stuff. So I couldn't have done that on my own. I relied heavily on them to be able to help me. So I'm extremely grateful for volunteers, and I know that times are tough at the moment, and sometimes we need to choose paid work over volunteering. But I always say to people, like especially with our family days, I promise you, you will walk away feeling really good about what you did today because you will meet some beautiful families. Um, and at our recent family day in Geelong, I sometimes think that the wheelchair station can be a little bit mundane. You're just putting the wheelchairs on and you're pushing, and it can get a little bit exhausting. But they both said that that was the most beautiful thing that they have done because they were providing someone who is unable to sit on a normal swing to have that joy of swinging. And for them, that, brought a lot of joy to them just being on that station when
Yeah.
no, and speaking to the families and speaking to the carers. And, it's very special. That's why I always encourage people to volunteer. It might only be once a year that you just dedicate yourself to one event or, you give 2 hours a month, but it's so humbling to know that you're supporting something and giving back some of your time for the greater good.
Yeah, it does. And it is, you're right. It's that feeling, and people volunteer for so many different reasons, and that's their story. But it's that walking away knowing you've done something and changed someone's day, changed someone's life, even, you can't buy that.
No.
So yeah, and that's exactly in essence what the glitter effect is. Everyone's got their glitter, they've just got to find that. And it's sometimes it takes people a long time to realize, where they want to spread their glitter, and that's fine too. But that's a beautiful story about those volunteers. What's the future got in hold for Friend in Me, Lou? What's you've got any?
So, like I said, we were events, we were lots of events, but I sort of a couple of years ago, I thought, okay, we do these fantastic events, we make people feel included, we give them a really good day, but what happens when they walk away and they're feeling the same? They're going back to that isolation, they're going back to that exclusion. So, some really big projects that we have coming up at the moment. We want to continue to do our pop-up reset zones. So these are zones that we're putting in schools and community organisations. Basically, if there's a space, we want to be able to it is basically a sensory room, but I like to use more reset as a name, just, that they can go in and calm and regulate and just have some time. So we want to do more of those in schools and organisations across Melbourne. Um, so they're one big project. Another big project which we're working on is called Inclusion Warriors. It is very much at pilot stage at the moment, but basically that is going out to sporting clubs, again, community organisations, be it dance, circus, and just be able to come up with a program where everybody can be part of the club or part of the organisation. There may be a child that is definitely not able to play basketball because maybe he's in a wheelchair and he can't play with the full senior team. But what else can we do to recognise some other things that he can do to be able to be part of that club and feel really special about being part of that club? So that was one project. And then on the follow on from that, we're thinking about doing a project called Warrior Ready. So that would be, for example, if we're focusing on netball, that would be a 6 to 8 week program where these kids come in and have mentors from the senior team. And it's just taking a slight step back with the rules and teaching them to try and get them ready to maybe go out and play with a team
Yeah,
on an able team.
fabulous.
So that's something that's quite new at the moment, but we're just rolling out. And then our third major one, which is almost ready to announce to the world, but it is happening, is our mobile sensory trailer. So this is a sensory room on wheels that we can take anywhere. Anywhere we can drive, we can set it up at events and schools and just be able to, again, have that space to reset. So my biggest thing is I can take my kids out. I can take my kids out for a coffee, for dinner. I can take them to events. Usually it might be a little bit all over the place with 4 kids, but I can do it and I can know how to handle situations. There's a lot of families out there that won't go to an event. They won't go to a cafe. They won't go to a restaurant because they're worried about what their child is going to do. We want to eliminate that, and we want to be able to give everybody the opportunity to go somewhere, but be able to have a safe place that they can go to if they need. So the idea is, for example, Avalon Air Show. We drive the trailer out to Avalon Air Show, and there is a space that someone says, you know, if your child's feeling overwhelmed or just needs a little bit of a break, there is this trailer. Please go and use the facility, and then they can come back. They've regulated,
Yep.
hopefully, maybe not. It's not always the answer, but we've given them the opportunity to be able to do the space. And yeah, so they're the three major things, along with, you know, still continue on with the sponsored birthday parties, still doing our bread and butter fundraising events, which is our gala balls. It's always something happening. Gala balls, our family days. Yeah, so when I say it like that, I'm like, oh, we are doing quite a lot of things at the
That's a
moment.
lot. So amazing stuff, friend in me. I mean, I'm struggling to keep up just in this chat. It's incredible. If there will be people out there now who are super keen to find out more about friend in me, how they could get involved, how they can support, just find out how they can even access some of the services. How can they do that, Lou?
Absolutely. So obviously the website, which is www.friendinme.org.au. Heavily active on socials. Usually if you ever need to get me, I am the one behind the messenger on Facebook and Instagram, and it's always a really nice place to touch base. Nice, easy, casual conversations. We've made lots of connections through the trusted old social media. So yeah, that's always the best way. My phone is always open for a chat, you know. So very, very grateful when people reach out to us. It gives us a little bit of a happy dance to, you know, keep us all going and keeping us alive. So plenty of ways to connect.
Amazing. And I'm sure you will have a few people connecting now. Lou Larkin from Friend in Me, it's been an absolute pleasure. And we look forward to seeing what happens with Friend in Me down the track. Take care and all the best.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining me, Kate Gniel, on The Glitter Effect. If you've loved this episode, be sure to subscribe, share it with a friend, and let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, keep showing up, making an impact, and sprinkling that glitter wherever you go. Bye for now.